I'm going to go ahead and change subjects to some more, just talking about music a little bit more. And we can always come back and visit that more. So a few weeks ago, I had done a little talk on the major scale. Now, I haven't put, so I'm behind putting some of these things up on YouTube. And I'm going to, I think I will go ahead and cut these up and put them up there. But the major scale is something I talk day in and day out about. I found out about it. This is one of the things that cracked me open to music when I was in my early 20s, listening to the band Fish a lot, and was just in love with music. But it was such a mystery to me, right? It was just this huge mystery. And so a friend of mine sat me down and really talked through the major scale. And once I saw the major scale, I realized that music is much more accessible. Now, let me back up and talk about a couple things. A scale is just a series of notes and laid out linearly. Okay. So there's 12 keys in Western music, and the major scale is going octave to octave in steps. So it's not skipping over a note, right? And there's a certain sequence of interval that's happening in every major scale, no matter what key you start on, right? So in music, in Western music, we have the half step and the whole step as the most basic movements between two notes. And so the major scale is a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Now, what's interesting about the major scale is that linearly speaking, it's something that we practice a lot for our dexterity in our hands. But when you look at it from an aerial perspective, it's also the exact notes that correspond to a key that we're playing in. And I love this word key lately. This word key is just coming up over and over and over again. And I never really thought about the fact that when you say key for a song, which maybe you've heard that before, like, oh, I need to sing this in the key of C, or I'm going to do this song in the key of F, or that song's done in G. We're talking about the key of the song. And I've never, ever thought about the fact that, like, a door key, like unlocking something, I've never really thought of it that way ever until right now, because the word key has been coming up a lot for me lately, just intuitively speaking. But really what we're talking about is the major scale. When it's linear, it shows you exactly the notes, right? Up and down, C to C octave. So for example, I would go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then I would come back down again. That's my C major scale I would practice. But what a key is seeing those exact notes from an aerial perspective and recognizing that the melody is now jumping around, right? It might go E to G, back to E, down to C, might bump all the way up to the A, do a sixth interval up to the A, and then move to the G. But linearly speaking, I can see I'm still just in the key of C. I'm still only using the notes from the key of C. And that's what gives my song its sound, right? So that was an interesting thing that who is this guy? Ed Roseman, Edley's Music Theory for Practical People. I picked up this book and I've been reading it because I feel like as many times as I've discussed the major scale and tried to discuss key, it's always been a difficult concept for adults to pick up in particular. And with kids, you don't necessarily try to explain it to them. What happens with kids is that you teach them scales and then you're teaching them songs, and then the two sort of meld together and it starts to become a concept. You know, many things in languages are this way. You don't define it, you just suddenly start to understand it. That's what happens with kids. And with adults, when it's possible, I do that as well, right? But with many times adults are like I am, where they want an overview first. And if they know the overview, then it helps with their motivation and garnering the patience it will take to get to a certain place. But it's been amazing how difficult it's been at times to explain it. So I'm always reading how different teachers teach these concepts. And this one in particular, I really liked. I liked that idea of it being an aerial view of a song. Let me read what he says, actually, his exact words. Wait, this isn't it. Let me get to it. This is on the major scale. Okay. So scales are a linear view and keys are an expanded aerial view of the same information, Keys also go even further, carrying with them a handful of relationships both from within the key and to other keys. These relationships include harmony and melody, as well as movement from key to key within a piece. So that's what's interesting, is that the more that you work with key and you look at scales outside of the context of songs, then yes, you start to understand these relationships between certain positions in the scale. And it doesn't matter which major scale, right? It's like a major scale from F sharp or a major scale from C. That fourth note in the scale makes an amazing chord, the 4 chord. It's a major chord, and when you combine that with the 5 chord starting at that 5th and the 1 chord, well, now you basically have the essence of your blues. And you have 3 chords that are used over and over and over again, right? Let's just back up for a second and talk a couple of concepts. Harmony and melody are the basics of your song, in the sense that melody is one note at a time. And so if I take that scale, and like I was saying earlier, I do the 3rd note to the 5th note to the 4th to the 5th in this little pattern, and typically melodies repeat a lot in little patterns. That's my melody, one note at a time. The harmony is the chord or more than one note played at the same time to support and make that melody stand out. That's the harmony. And those two components together really make up the essence of a song. Though in reality, if you wanted to copyright a song, it's really the melody and the lyrics that you're copywriting, because the chord structures underneath, they really come down to this. There's not an infinite number of chord choices that would work. So, and that's what's interesting too. That's where it can come down to an arrangement of a song, because especially in jazz, they love to reharmonize. So you would have a certain melody, but you have different pianists that would want to play different chords underneath that. And even there's still a finite number of combinations that would really work for our aesthetics, at least. But they do, but that would be more considered the arrangement and not the actual piece, right? And this is one of the main reasons why I have a lot of singers come to me and they're melody oriented. They hear a lot of melody, but they don't know anything about an instrument. And so they are at the mercy of a pianist or an arranger or the people putting the chords to it. If you really want, more control over your music, that's why it's wise to learn guitar or piano, some of the easiest that you can use to come up with a harmony underneath. And once you understand the scales, the modes, once you understand that, then it's way easier to compose than you think. It's way easier to arrange than you could possibly think. It's a puzzle. So that's melody and harmony. So I got a little bit sidetracked on what I was going to say about that. That's the melody and the harmony of it. I'm going to get present with the moment. See if I can discern if this is a this and no further moment, or if I've just forgotten what I wanted to say about that. Yeah, well, it's not coming back to me. So when you're, now I do remember. All right. So most songs in their most simplistic form are just going to be a one key. And historically speaking, this was really more true. Though a lot of times, I think I talked about it in the last show, that Beatles, for example, would be mainly in a key, and there might be one note or one chord that steps out for one moment, and that's a beautiful moment. A lot of jazz is not in one key, right? You can have a lot of modulation, but it's also fallen out of favor with a lot of people because the aesthetics of it can become intellectual, almost like modern art in the last century, where if you know the steps of how they got that far out, it's interesting. But the aesthetic of it for the average listener, it can get so far away from what they want to hear that it doesn't really even sound good anymore, right? And there's a lot of atonal music, a lot of experiments. And for me, a lot of that stuff lost favor because it was so intellectual, and that gets into the 440 discussion. It got so intellectual in music that it lost touch with the idea of beauty. And it also, lost a bit of connection with human beings, because also at the same time that they were getting so intellectual with this stuff, the average person just wasn't being music educated. And so many things come down to aesthetics and music as well. So aesthetically speaking, most of the time we do stay in one key. It's certainly where you want to start if you're new to music, and many people just prefer that, but it's not exclusive. And I would say that there are many other scales that you can learn in music, including blues scales, including minor scales, all kinds of things. Some of those minor scales actually do come from the major scale, though. And so the major scale, I would say, makes up about 80%. It's 80% of the foundation of music. And this is what Mike Gordon said from Fish, that I found out so long ago when I had this discussion, learning about this on napkins at a restaurant. That just once you know your major scales, like inside and out, like really know them, then you understand and you see inside of music. There's other scales to learn, but they all become references off of the major scale. So now you're only changing this or that. The major scale really can be a reference for so many things: theory, dexterity, songwriting, chord progressions. So that's why I emphasize the major scale a lot. It's not the only way to think about music. And let me reiterate that I'm only talking about Western music, because in other styles of music, for example, they might even have semitones where we've only have half steps, right? So there's other scales to consider. But for a lot of the music that has become popularized, you're talking one scale, which equals one key for a song. And that's a great place for anybody to start, any adult who's interested in music. Major scales are one of the biggest things that I recommend starting. You don't even know in the beginning like how much you're focusing and working on so many aspects of music at once. I recommend learning all 12, even though there's definitely arguments to be made for only learning certain keys, since certain genres only play, in certain keys, certain singers only sing in certain keys. But I was always very much of a hard ass in pushing the idea of learning all 12 keys, your major scales, and knowing them inside and out. And, when I say knowing them, I don't mean like learning them for 6 months. I don't mean learning them for 2 years. I mean 20, 30 years. That might be a little bit daunting. So let me back that up, because you don't have to, but I'm just saying you don't quit. Right? You don't quit after 2 years. You always keep major scales as part of what you're doing. And more and more music just becomes second nature to you, because everything that you're doing is coming from that. So that's a major scale. And let me say it's the key to music for you. Ooh, that's it, right? Major scales are the key. Oh my gosh, I'm having too much fun with this. It's amazing because I've been teaching this for so long and I've never said that before, honestly. So major scales are the key to music. Fantastic.